Well, now it is my honor to introduce this morning's keynote speaker. And this is an opportunity for all of us to consider the impact of individuals in growing sustainable communities, building resiliency, and becoming we. Anna Garcia Doyle is the founder and executive director of One Earth Collective. Sorry, I lost my place on the script here. There we go. Anna likes to be future-facing. She believes there is no time like the present to focus on the future of our planet and of generations to come. Anna is a founding member and the executive director of One Earth Collective, producers of One Earth Film Festival, which just concluded its 12th season. The other year-round programs for youth, resilient community building, and more. Her organization has won a United Nations Sustainable Development Goals Award in 2019 from the United Nations Association of Greater Chicago. And she has been named a 2022 Crain's Chicago Business Notable Leader in Sustainability. Anna is a founding member of the Oak Park District 97 PTO Green Teams, which won several awards for its zero waste work. She's a TEDx speaker, a LEED Gold homeowner, together with her husband Jim, who's here to cheer us on today, and a public speaker and trainer who has spent more than 25 years in digital publishing, marketing, and strategy. She's also a proud mama to 3 sharp, sweet young greenies. So please join me in welcoming Anna Garcia Doyle.
Wow, thank you for that wonderful introduction, Mayor Kavanaugh. I want to make sure that my tech team can let me know if I'm good to go, or do I have to? Okay, great, thank you. So thanks again, Mayor, for the wonderful introduction. I am so pleased and honored to be here with all of you from Chicago, which is the traditional homelands of the Council of the Three Fires, the Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations, and home to many other tribes, including today, peoples from over 100 tribal nations. Despite this, there are currently no federally recognized tribes in Illinois, due in part to colonization, relocation, and genocide. I wanted to just give a quick shout out to Gina for inviting me here today, and to the entire conference team for what already has been a very successful conference, only halfway through, so thank you. I just want to also show that I dressed for the festive occasion. Just to shout out, my little cape here is made out of recycled sweaters of all kinds, and then I have my recycled Indian sari earrings, so just happy to be in celebration here with all of you. My talk this morning is called Tree Space and We Space, and it discusses both ecosystem and community resilience. So my environmental work has spanned the past 18 years. I didn't major in environmental science, and sustainability was not a widely used term or a common program of study way back when. But something happened in the year 2000 when my husband Jim and I were living, working, and starting our family abroad in Zurich, Switzerland, a place where our hardy, nature-loving friends delighted in alpine hikes, and where they lived lighter on the planet than we ever had in our home country. I had a series of moments that would later spark my passion for environmental work. One came while holding our firstborn daughter, only a few weeks old. I was simultaneously overwhelmed by the responsibility and fixated on the task of what to feed this little being, something organic, of course, how to keep icky toxins from getting on her baby blanket or her hair or her delicate skin, whether the health of our world would be preserved long enough for her to wade in creeks catching salamanders in old milk jugs like I did as a kid, or fall in love with the smell of grass as her father had. I'm a digital marketer by trade, but starting in 2004, I began working on green teams and leading green school projects. My husband, Jim, and I underwent the sustainable renovation of our 100-year-old home. I joined with other green-minded neighbors to start the One Earth Film Festival and to develop sustainable communities initiatives. And like all good environmentalists, I enjoyed making homemade bread and yogurt and kombucha. I was humming along in my environmental sphere when I was struck in 2016, momentarily confused even, while listening to an interview of civil rights lawyer, activist, and author of The New Jim Crow, Michelle Alexander. Throughout the interview, she used the word disposable. She spoke of the Black Lives Matter movement and about our disposable treatment of one another. Disposable? That was our word. That's our environmental word, a word we used in building zero waste programs in schools. Disposable? A word that was written into our protocols for avoiding single-use plastic straws and utensils at our environmental festival events. Disposable. A sadly, horrifyingly fitting word to describe how little value one human might place on another, as meant to discard and replace like a cheap pair of Walmart flip-flops. Think about that kind of disposability and what it's doing to our planet. Now think about disposability in the context of lives and people and what seeing one another as disposable is doing to our humanity. I began to see parallels. Consider this. 48.6 billion plastic bottles and up to 5 trillion plastic bags are used worldwide in a single year. 24.9 million people are abused, trafficked in sex and labor around the world in exchange for $150 billion in profits from this widespread crime. 1.6 billion tons of food is uneaten globally each year, an insult to the hunger issues that plague our world and a dangerous source of methane in our landfills. 567,715 people around the United States are unhoused each night, a travesty in a country with so much wealth. 40 million tons every year of toxic electronic waste are discarded around the world. That's like throwing away 800 laptops every second. 2 million people are currently dispossessed in the American criminal justice system, more people per capita than in any other nation. A year after Michelle Alexander bridged these for me, I took the same bridge, but in reverse, from civil rights back to environment. While reading his award-winning book, Between the World and Me, I was shaken by author and Ta-Nehisi Coates' repeated references to the body, his body, plundering the body of another. It was a stark, visceral, and painful reminder about the history of our country and all the times and ways Black and brown bodies have been subject to control and surveillance and violence. And then, this really, really hit me too, Coates likens our blatant disregard for the body of another to the human race's, blatant disregard for our collective body, which is, in fact, the earth itself. Since then, I have seen this theme repeat, the one of othering and domination, of disposing of or wanting to control whatever we see as other. Like when I got to know the work of poet Jericho Brown, the director of the creative writing program at Emory University. He said, "If you are good at hurting Black people, you will hurt our environment, I promise you. If you are good at hurting women, you will be interested in war, I promise you. It is the othering of our planet and those who inhabit it with us that keeps us from sharing space, sharing concern, finding commonality, cultivating mutuality." During the One Earth Film Festival a few years ago, we showed a film called Project Wild Thing, where children were shown images up close of everyday nature, a dandelion, say, or a robin. They were then asked to name them. The children were stumped, none could. A few acknowledged having noticed these objects in the world at some point or other. The images were then replaced by common logos: McDonald's, Nike, Target, each identified swiftly by each child. Indeed, a US Department of Interior study found that the average American youth can identify 1,000 corporate logos, but can't ID 10 plants and animals native to their hometown. Are we forgetting to teach our children about the world that sustains them? Are we unable or unwilling to pull them from their overscheduled lives and screens to have them scramble up trees, roll down hills, stomp in streams? It's not just children. According to a study by the Greater Good Science Center at the University of California, Berkeley, our disconnection from nature is evidenced by a change in our cultural conversation. The study showed a clear decline of nature references and reflections in our cultural products, art like books, songs, and movies. For every 3 nature-related words in the popular songs of the 1950s, for example, there are only slightly more than 1 50 years later. Technological change has been a source of our disconnection from nature. The rise of virtual recreation options, from television starting in the 1950s, to video games starting in the 1970s, to the internet starting in the 1990s, are partially substituting for nature as a place to play and be entertained. One of the alarming places this is headed, of course, as most of us intuitively know, especially those of us working in environmental fields, is that humans are exploiting and destroying nature on unprecedented scale. The London Zoological Society 2020 Living Planet Report and the United Nations Assessment Report these reports found that, and I just have some data for you, so I'm going to be reading this a little bit, that worldwide biodiversity is decreasing at concerning rates, with 1 million species at risk because of human activity. That deforestation and the conversion of wild spaces for human food production have largely been blamed for the destruction of Earth's web of life. That 75% of the Earth's ice-free land has been significantly altered by humans, and that almost 90% of global wetlands have been lost since 1700. So, where do I take solace? Tools like art, which, as earlier noted, reflect culture, can also shape culture in perhaps profound ways. This is one of the reasons that One Earth Collective is doing its small part through films and a film festival to maybe help shift culture a little bit, maybe to seed social change however we can. I'd like to do a quick show of hands. How many of us has been changed in some way by a movie, any movie, no matter the topic? Yeah, me too. Me too. Can anyone name any of the films? No matter the topic. Shout it out. Do you have one? Anybody have a name of a film that they're like, oh, that made me think differently, see differently, behave? Who? Sorry? Inside Out. Thank you. Great one. Who else? Contact. Icarus. Al Gore's film. Might be why some of us are in the room today, even. Alice. Thank you. So you see what I mean, right? Art can reflect culture, but maybe it can also help shape culture if it touches us and changes us. So I'm working to increase my own proximity to nature. I'm learning new language from being in my garden and with my conservationist friends and with my iNaturalist app. How many fans do we have in the room for iNaturalist and all sorts of apps like that? So a white oak, right? Black swallowtail, little blue stem, red-winged blackbird, right? Some new language that I am picking up. But I'm going to be honest, and I'm going to say it's been hard for me to make good on my New Year's resolution to touch nature every day, even if it means just breathing outside for 5 minutes. Another quick show of hands. how many of you have ever made a resolution like this to spend more everyday time in nature? Anybody else? Anybody else? Maybe not even every day, like a few times a week, right? Yeah, I'd love to hear more on how you guys are enacting this intention later when we have our dialogue portion, because it's been hard for me. So I have a little more data for you now. We know that there are clear benefits to our connection with nature. A 2016 study by Frontiers in Public Health found that, and we all know this, but it's great to just see it written, right? Exposure to natural sunlight led to improvements in neurological and circadian systems. Physical contact with the Earth's surface regulated diurnal body rhythms. And walking activities in forests reduced blood pressure levels. Similarly, the American Psychological Association finds that exposure to nature, even urban nature, can improve attention, lower stress, lift mood, reduce the risk of psychiatric disorders, and even cause upticks, I love this, in empathy and cooperation. So why do we still see nature as non-essential to our survival, right? To our thriving, even as other, right? I've been thinking about this, a la Dr. Richard Louv, who coined that term, nature deficit disorder. I like to think of it as our tree deficit disorder. I have also been thinking about our we deficit disorder. In a 2013 study, Public Religion Research Institute found that 3/4, 75% of white Americans said their social network was almost entirely white. Black Americans reported their network was 65% of Black Americans reported their network was entirely made up of other Black folks, and 46% of Hispanic Americans said their network was entirely Hispanic. A more recent study from 2019 still reported that 21% of white Americans reported seldom or never interacting with someone of a different race or ethnicity, and even among those who did frequently interact with someone of a different racial or ethnic background, 74% said those interactions occurred in the workplace, and 46%, less than half, said those interactions occurred in friendship groups. So on the eve of the last census in 2020, the Brookings Institute released a pair of reports finding that America's population is more racially diverse than ever before, with 4 out of every 10 residents projected to identify as a non-white racial group, and projecting that regardless of US immigration trends, and here are the immigration trends plotted out, right? High immigration, main immigration, which is status quo, today's immigration rate, low or zero immigration, our nation will be majority non-white by between 2041 and 2060, depending on the immigration scenario. Despite this, Brookings says, at the neighborhood level, long-standing patterns of segregation, while declining since the peak years in the 1960s, still persist. New York Times bestselling author, policy advocate, and expert on American economy, Heather McGhee, in her book, The Sum of Us, now also a podcast, a great podcast, breaks it down this way. We are already becoming more and more of a racially diverse population, and in the course of 2 generations, white public opinion went from supporting segregation to recognizing integration as a positive good. But while support for integration is high, in reality, we are not only not walking the walk, most of us are not even on the same track. So to shed light on intention versus reality, McGhee points to a study where Professor Maria Kreisen at the University of Illinois looked at housing and race and the level of integration folks were seeking in their prospective neighborhoods. White respondents specified wanting to live in neighborhoods that were average 47% white. Black respondents, 37% Black, and Latinx respondents, 32% Latinx. McGhee points out how interesting it is that none of the groups want to be in the majority, right? The study goes on to show that Black and Latinx respondents searching for housing do search for housing matching their desired levels of integration in the neighborhoods. White respondents end up searching in neighborhoods that are average 68% white and then choosing to live in neighborhoods that are 74% white, when remember, their initial intention was to look for a neighborhood that was 47% white. Okay. So I find this fascinating, even though my consciousness around these issues really didn't start to arise until the middle of high school, and then when I went off to a majority white college in Boston. Until that time, my identity and my experiences were shaped by my immigrant family's story and by my diverse experiences from pre-K until high school. I'm a first-generation Filipina American. I am the first and the oldest girl to be born on American soil in Queens, New York, touted as having some of the most diverse zip codes in the United States, and with what is called a diversity score, according to bestneighborhoods.com, and based on recent census data, the diversity score there is 98 out of 100. I started school in the intentional planned community of Columbia, Maryland, a project by pioneering urban planner and civic activist James Rouse, with a diversity score of 99. I grew up in Chicago, famous for both its diversity and its segregation, with a diversity score of 87. And I went to school in the Boston area, which has an even lower diversity score of 85. These scores all reflect relatively high diversity urban environments, but segregation, of course, is rampant in these cities and most parts of our country. Despite high diversity, there can still be a large we deficit, as the population and housing data shared earlier suggest. So in the first grade, is the first time I became aware that not all Asian American Pacific Islanders, so AAPI, people who look like me were immigrants, especially because at my public high school in Chicago's Buena Park neighborhood, there was a very large population of both immigrants and refugees. The revelation came on hearing my sister's Japanese-American teacher speaking, leading her students down the hall with an American accent. That was new to me. She directed that year's all-school musical, The Wiz, with her American accent, because all other AAPI adults I knew at that time were in my family, and they all had started immigrating during the late 60s, around the time I was born, and they all spoke with thick Filipino accents. So this was like a real cultural awakening for me. So experiencing grammar in middle schools and highly integrated Chicago schools, the next real inkling I had of my differences, my otherness maybe, as distinct from the white dominant culture, was when I entered a very diverse high school on Chicago's near southwest side. It was the very first time I was exposed to large groups of white teens who were raised really differently than me. Some, like from Edison Park, which is about 93% white, and from LaGrange, which is a suburb near Chicago, which has a diversity score of about 65. So my adult life continued a little bit in that trajectory. It brought me further and further from my racially diverse and integrated roots, from a heavily white majority college in Chestnut Hill, Massachusetts, which had a 12% person of color student enrollment, not including international students, to working in urban corporations, often as one of few or the only person of color in the room or the only woman of color in the room. So even if we have not lived it or aren't conscious of it, the benefits of being in diverse integrated spaces are clear and well documented. So I have some more data for you. Back to Heather McGee. She points out in study after study, and I think this is fascinating, finding that contact across racial and other differences reduces our anxiety, increases our ability to empathize with one another, is associated with lower prejudice. A little bit like some of the things that we heard about nature and being in nature too, reducing anxiety and such. One study compared students to predominantly white schools with white students who attend diverse K-12 schools, finding that the latter achieved better learning outcomes and even higher test scores, especially in the areas of math and science. White students at racially diverse schools develop more cultural competency and the ability to collaborate and feel at ease with people from different racial, ethnic, and economic backgrounds than students who attended segregated schools. But their minds are also improved when it comes to critical thinking and problem solving. It's that exposure to multiple viewpoints is leading to more flexible and creative thinking. Amherst College psychology professor Deborah San-Hoyland starts a large study of over 70,000 undergraduate students in which racially and ethnically diverse experience resulted in a more fluent acquisition of intellectual, scientific, and professional skills. It's important to note that the results were similar for Black, white, Asian, and Latinx students. So the dividends of diversity in education pay out over a lifetime. Cultural competency is a necessity, of course, we know this. In today's multicultural professional world, US corporations spend about $8 billion a year on diversity training to boost it among their workforce. And I'll just say that this current racial reckoning that we're having since George Floyd's murder in 2020, as well as raising my multicultural kids in an increasingly diverse society, wanting to get closer to my roots in mixed communities, seeing and appreciating better the benefits of being in spaces shared with nature and spaces shared with others who aren't like me. All of these things have me living and working in more intentionally integrated ways, trying to achieve that contact, cultivate that contact that Heather McGee references. Because solving the tree deficit and the we deficit are not sideline engagements, not something that will happen by intention or osmosis, but a true, messy, tricky, worthwhile, rewarding, critical contact sport. So how do we do it? How do we solve the tree deficit and the we deficit? With regards to our environment, it's easy for the issues to seem far away, bird species that I cannot name, declining in the remote Amazon, wildfires on a distant coast, drought and desertification in the global south, a not yet visible enough climate crisis for future generations to solve. Making these issues concrete and bringing them up close, if they're not already, can be a powerful tool in our climate fight. Employing Roger Ebert's observation that film is an empathy machine, One Earth uses storytelling to bring our hearts, to bring the climate crisis from a place of data in our heads to a place of stories and feelings in our hearts, right? To the drive to do something, to take real action with our hands. We actually call it our head, heart, hands model, and our scale is not yet that immense, but we're touching about 5,000 people a year, and we think it's working. I have some data to show you that it's working, but I'm going to skip that because I know that we're running on time. Okay, so with regards to solving our we deficit disorder, again, it's that up-close thing, right, that calls to us. And I think I am behind. Am I behind on my slides? I'm sorry. I'm not. Okay. Sorry, everybody. I'm just a little bit like, where? With the time, I'm just a little worried. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm completely lost here. All right. Yes, okay. Thanks for your patience. Okay, so we're trying to solve our we deficit disorder. And it's that up close thing, again, that calls to us. As much as we read the right books and listen to the right podcasts, we cannot appreciate and reap the benefits of being together truly, authentically from afar. This work is once again a contact sport. It's getting in the same room, enjoying food, art, nature, meeting new people, taking a chance, crafting more inclusive hiring policies, learning about new to you cuisine, visiting a park that you never visited before, striking up a conversation and learning to listen. Might feel stretchy, uncomfortable, exhausting, but stepping outside our comfort zone will feel like that. I had this like cute little cartoon, but I'm going to skip it. I'm sorry. Time. All right. So over the past few years, just a couple minutes left, I've been approached by a number of well-meaning friends. They see me for the woman of color I am. They know that I am on the intentional path of working for both racial and climate justice, and they explain the conundrum of needing to diversify their boards. They request introductions to people in my networks, people of color in my networks. They ask who I might recommend to join their upcoming round of board recruitment interviews. I absolutely appreciate their awareness that building diverse teams and communities is super important, and it is. But I must admit that I am a little bit frustrated by this quick fix, right? This quick fix approach, that it frustrates me. Only bumping up against one another can we diversify and integrate any of our spaces, building richer, more representative communities. So I tell my friends the much less quick but better way, right? To build more relationships with people who don't look like them, who maybe don't think like them, maybe who don't live where they live. They should attend the weekly farmers market in our neighboring community, meet the farmers, spend some money, learn what's happening in the neighborhood. This Chicago community, bordering mine, has been largely disinvested since the 1970s. It is 78% Black, 15% Latinx, and 6% white. They should attend one of the rich cultural events always happening at the town hall there, right? That sister community shares a street with us. It's a short bike ride, a 3 to 7 minute car ride. That community already has many people, of course, living their own rich lives, hiring for their own board positions, running their own companies, hosting their own community events. Our end game is in building the beloved community that the late Representative John Lewis spoke of. To help address the we deficit disorder, we would do better to really see each other, to know one another, to build authentic relationships together with the kind of reciprocity that Robin Wall Kimmerer, the author and scientist, spoke of in her work. Okay, bringing it on home. So this is the part where our attention on these issues, my head and my vision space, turns into the intention to solve these issues here in my heart space, and the resolve to take action on these issues using my hands. I'm going to say that again. Attention, intention, action. Many in this room can probably share some examples from their work, and I look very forward to hearing about them in the time that we have after, which I think we'll still have time after. For now, I'll share 2 quick examples. I might just share 1 quick example of what environmental work through a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens looks like for me and my organization. Okay, so real quickly, this is a map of Chicago and our West Side communities and our near west suburbs. And it shows you can see in the upper right quadrant, this community of Austin in both maps, okay? 50% of the Austin community must travel half a mile or more to access healthy food, making it a food desert and making it susceptible to diet-related illnesses, right? Like type 2 diabetes and heart disease and obesity. Further, Austin is 36% larger in square mileage and twice as populous as my community, neighboring community of Oak Park. So it's 7 square miles versus our 4.5 square miles, and they have 100,000 residents versus our 50,000 residents, but they have half the access to green space, half. So we are working as part of a 22-member collaborative tasked with changing the food landscape and rewriting the narrative around food in the Austin community. We do this through emergency food access, grocery access, culinary entrepreneurship, gardens and farms, of which there are already 15. So when people say oh, it's disinvested, oh, there's nothing there. That's not true. It's not true at all. There's 15 farms right there already. We're also working in food education. So I'm going to go quickly through this just so you can see some of the pictures of what we're doing. We are showing food justice films in food education events, but we're not just showing movies, we're wrapping it in engagement and fun and learning. We are having garden tours and chef demos and dialogues and nutrition talks and vegan food and mini farmers markets, and we give away seedlings that people can plant and harvest at home with recipes appropriate for that plant. So there's just a lot kind of spinning around this project, and this is one of the things that equity with environment in terms of our organization looks like. And then my last thing is really just to talk about Austin Grown real quick, which is that we are beginning our 5th year of partnership with something called Build Chicago, a lead agency in our city. And their mission is gang intervention and violence prevention, which is like unlikely. Like, why would they partner with us, an environmental group, right? But we have to be creative, I think, in thinking about these partnerships. So our shared program is called Austin Grown, and you will see the kinds of things we're doing. You'll see Ethan in the upper right with one of our 9 chickens. We cook in the garden with vegan chefs who pop up a kitchen right there on the farm where they're growing their fruits and veggies. We eat together. We go on field trips. We have a speaker series. The Obama Foundation comes every year and talks about civic engagement and its importance to community resiliency. So I could go on all day about these projects, and I sort of have. But alongside our film festivals, these projects have become my heart of hearts. I'd like to end on a note of resiliency, because while it's all still a work in progress, these projects are led by multiracial coalitions of organizations and people, and they are, to me, what resilience through interdependence can look like. Diversity is a tool for resiliency, and interdependence creates trust, strength, and vitality. What happens to a monocrop, say, of corn, which is not interplanted with other species? It becomes, It becomes susceptible to disease and erosion. It needs to be fortified by a rich ecosystem beyond itself. What happens to a community populated by one type of people? It can create fear of the other and animosity towards differences. We need to fortify one another with the ecosystem of our varied backgrounds, experiences, and voices. So here, in conclusion, are the words of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who I only realized later in my adult life was a true environmental justice activist, and whose words now feel as related to our tree opportunity as to our we opportunity. It really boils down to this, that all life is interrelated. We are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied into a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. We aren't going to have peace on earth until we recognize this basic fact of the interrelated structure of all reality. Thank you. Do we still have a little time, or? One question? Okay. What time? How many minutes do you want to just give us the 5 minutes? Okay, we've got about 5 minutes. I'm happy for any questions. I am happy for anybody to share anything that they're doing on this thread. I'd love to keep learning more. Are there any questions, or are there any comments or experiences that folks want to share? And I'll see if I can see you out there. It's a little... Anybody?
Right over here.
Okay, great, thank you.
Amazing presentation. That's the first time I've ever seen somebody pack so much into a short
It was
presentation.
a lot. Thank you for your patience, it was a lot.
But one of the things you left me really hungering for more of how to tie the environmental to the people. And so I was wondering if you had several books or podcasts that you would recommend so that we can continue this journey.
Absolutely. I'm a religious podcast listener, and also I have been reading now for a number of years on these topics, and I can't get enough. I would absolutely recommend Heather McGhee's The Sum of Us. She just has so much to say. She has a lot of knowledge, and a lot of what she does is research-based. So I would say for sure that. There's a few different podcasts as well that tie education, let's say, to equity. So School Colors is one, and then there's another one, Nice White Parents is one. So if anything in the educational field, I feel like there's a lot of stories, but some data and historical stuff as well. But yeah, maybe I'll cull some things and give them to Gina, and maybe that there's a place that those can be posted. Thank you for the question. Anybody else?
Right up here?
Yeah.
Right behind you.
Thank you for very interesting presentation. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I always ask my students, what is the most dangerous things to our environment? And all they say plastic, CO2, methane gas, and those things. So I want to know, what do you think is the most dangerous thing? Then I give you my answer. What do you think is the most dangerous to our environment?
I think that the most dangerous thing to our environment is to not be in it and love it for what it is, because that will prevent us from saving her.
Well, we are approximately the same way. The most dangerous things to our environment is our attitudes. And lack of education. So if we correct our attitudes of entitlement, and I need to do that, I want this, I want that, the way that we dispose things is all goes to attitudes. The way that we deal with the environment is all goes to attitudes. So we have to start educating our public, and that should start from elementary school up to university level. Nobody can go home free and say it's not my problem. So if we correct our attitudes, we correct most of these problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. Are we okay? We have time for one more. Anybody? Question or just even something to share? Happy for that too.
Right back here.
I saw some data recently that said that the quickest solution to climate change is education of girls and women.
Absolutely. It's in the top 10. It's number 7 in Drawdown. I'm sure some of you are familiar with Paul Hawkins' Drawdown. Educating girls and women can help kind of stem our overpopulation crisis. Thank you for that. It's helpful. Of course, plant-based eating and reducing food waste are number 3 and number 4. And we touch those things every single day, every one of us in this room, if we're lucky to eat every day, right? But we touch those things, and those are absolutely in our control as well. Anything else? Great. Okay. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Well, Anna, thank you so much for kicking us off this morning with ways that we can think about how, I like how you put this, our head, our heart, and our actions can connect as we focus on what we're learning today.